Welcome everyone to After Lunch Special. This is your time to kick back and settle in with great people doing great things from Science of Mind magazine. I'm your host today, Reverend Karin Wilson. And as many of you know, Centers for Spiritual Living has made it one of its key objectives to embrace diversity and be an ally to those seeking to build a future based on racial equity. That's why we thought it would be great to introduce you to Tanya Walker. She's a lawyer and managing partner of Walker Law in Toronto. And Tanya has been making great strides in the area of addressing systemic racism. In 2016, she became the first Black elected female bencher from Toronto in the 220 plus year history of the Ontario Law Society. An award-winning lawyer, including the Gold Key Award from Osgoode Hall Law School, Tanya is a frequent guest on several TV news programs, and we're very grateful that she's with us today. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for your kind words.
I just wanted to start by looking back at 2020. There were two things that really stood out to me. There were clearly, obviously, the pandemic and its global impact, but equally so, it seemed that the rights of Black people were really catapulted onto the global stage as well. And I'm just wondering what you noticed about how the conversation changed in this last year.
Well, what I noticed is that people generally just had a little bit less tolerance. I don't know if it's because we feel like, we're under house arrest and we're just not operating normally. But there's a little bit of frustration and lack of tolerance. And I noticed that more people were willing to continue the dialogue and ask, like, why are we at a point where lives of Black people can be taken away, and why do they not matter as part of human society? And what can I do? How can I fulfill my part, or what is my role on ensuring that the lives of others are considered the same as everyone else? So I really saw that dialogue begin to open. I had some of my colleagues, lawyers, reach out to me, mostly men, white men, who said, you must be feeling a little pain. Like, I feel bad hearing about this. I could only imagine how you might feel. And I'm just letting you know, I'm with you. And that made me feel wonderful, because despite it all, I think all of us want to have support. All of us want to have someone say to us, I understand how you're feeling, show us some empathy. And, I'm here to talk if you'd like to talk. And it made me feel as if my feelings were relevant, that I wasn't my feelings weren't being blown out of proportion. The sadness, the fear that I had, it made it feel, unfortunately, more legitimate, because people who look nothing like me were saying to me, I understand, and I feel bad.
You mentioned just there talking about roles. Do you see yourself as a role model of sorts? Has that sort of been part of your inspiration to move forward in this area?
I do see myself as somewhat as a role model. I mean, that's very important in two aspects: to teach younger people that if you want to practice law, you aren't interested in becoming a commercial litigator. Although at this point in time, I'm almost in my 15th year of practice, it's heavily dominated by men. If you look like me, you can do it. You don't need to look in the mirror and say, well, I'm female, or I'm a minority, I'm Black, and I don't see enough people around doing this, so I shouldn't even open my eyes to it either. You can, and you should. And the second point is, I see myself also as a role model for people who don't look like me, because then if they see people like me in this role, they will believe that we should be in this role. Our intellect will be seen as the same as other people. And being seen as having the same intellect or having the same intellectual capacity is very important, because that's what makes people decide to retain us. That makes people decide to render decisions in our favor. And so it's very important to be seen as a role model, not just for people who look like me, but very importantly for people who don't.
And did you have any experience like that in your early years where people didn't grasp the position that you were in?
Yes, I've had not even early years like this year, but
Oh,
so what? Yes, I have like some of my junior lawyers are male, um, and I've had experiences working with junior lawyers who are white men, and it's automatically assumed that I'm their junior lawyer.
mm,
I practice civil litigation, which means it's financial disputes. It's essentially fights over money, and I've had people in court, like physical courtrooms, believe that I was the registrar, or which is the assistant for the judge, believe that I was a person who was charged with a crime, even though I don't practice criminal law. Um, I've even had this year going to the courts in the midst of COVID. When I attended the courthouse, I've had court staff ask me, like, what courtroom are you assigned to? Because they thought I was one of their colleagues. And
mm,
at first, I'm kind of taken aback, but then I thought to myself, you really can't blame them, because sometimes if you don't see people that look like me at all, it's just not going to register automatically that when I attend a courthouse, I'm here to argue a case. I'm not necessarily court staff working, you know, with the judges. So I think it happens so much, and it continues to happen. I wish it was just early years, but it does continue to happen. But what also happens is that people do see me as a lawyer. People do see me as a person that is intellectual, and those situations where people don't view me that very favorably are now it has dwindled down quite a bit. It happens once in a while, but not that often anymore.
so some of these concerns in your role as a bencher, and you were just reelected in 2019, did you bring some of these issues forward to the Law Society as a whole?
Yes, I shared my stories. I believe it was 2016, 2017, we passed 13 recommendations to recognize racism and sexism in the profession. I wasn't part of the group that really worked on those initiatives, but I did advocate highly for them. And I share my stories. Even up to last year, I shared my stories with the group of benchers about what has led me to even open this firm, which is I am a product of discrimination, racial and gender discrimination. And it got to a point where I couldn't really take it anymore. And I thought I need to do my job, and my job is not easy, you know. So I just need to practice and do my job. And so I share my stories with other people so they can understand, because sometimes they're really in awe. They're just like, we're both born in Toronto. I can't believe you have to deal with these things. And I'm like, I can't believe it either. But I just appreciate that you are willing to listen, and you're willing to let me share. And based on what I've shared with you, just realize I'm not that special. It has happened to many, many people, far worse situations. But at least now that you understand where I'm coming from, we can work to help advocate for change.
Hmm. So you recently got reelected, somewhat recently, 2019,
Yes.
as a bencher. And what was it like coming to this group a second time round? How did that go?
It was a little bit different because there were a group of benchers that ran on a campaign. It was known as a slate. About 22 or 23 of them ran a campaign, and one of the campaign promises was to change one of the 13 principles that recognize racism and sexism in profession. So one of the requirements is now, like all lawyers, we have to hand in this form at the beginning of every year. We kind of check off the boxes to say that we've completed all our legal education classes, that the composition of type of practice we do. It's a maybe, I don't think it's many more than 10 pages. But now one of the changes that we implemented is a box where you check it off. And to me, my interpretation of it is that you will abide by the Human Rights Code. And then so um, I'm paraphrasing here. That's not what it says, but that's my interpretation. And so there was a group of benchers that ran on this campaign where it's kind of controlling thought, because even if you don't believe in that, you're being forced to kind of check a box controls thought, and there shouldn't be controlled thought. And so pretty much all of them got in terms of being elected. Many of them received more votes than me. I received almost 3,000. And so it kind of changed the climate of the benchers, where there were different, really polar opposite views. And I just thought to myself, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I'm not always going to agree with everyone's opinion, but it doesn't mean that we can't work together. Many of us have friends, or married and or have children, and I'm sure that we've experienced times when we don't necessarily agree, but you look at the big picture, the relationship and working with each other towards a common goal, and that really should be the focus. And so, although the climate has kind of changed, just because the group has substantially changed, it hasn't taken away from my focus, which is working to collaboratively with each other so we can achieve our goals and the goals for the public, because the Law Society governs the public, governs the profession for the public. And that's really the goal, is what can we do to help the public? And I haven't taken my eyes off that ball.
So was there any kind of case where you maybe, given that experience that you just outlined, was there any case where you actually worked together on a human rights issue of some kind, and people did come together in a positive way?
Yes, I'm very happy to say I'm the co-chair of the Human Rights Monitoring Group, where we sometimes agree to send letters of intervention for people who are advocating for the rights of human beings. And they're just really doing their jobs. They're judges, paralegals, or even human rights defenders, because not every country recognizes paralegals. So it's human rights defenders. And so what happened recently was Nasrin Sotoudeh. She was imprisoned in Iran. And there's a number of reasons, but one reason that she had kind of friction with the government is because she represented women who were involved in a peaceful protest against wearing a hijab, right? And so we agreed as a group, it was unanimous to send a letter to intervene on her behalf. The number of letters were sent before, but this has happened again recently. And then in order for that letter to actually go ahead, we actually have a meeting with all benchers, not just a group of us, like this 7 or 8 of us, but all benchers, where we have to get a motion passed to send a letter. And so I carried the motion at it's called convocation, that big group of bencher meeting. And it was seconded by one of the members who ran on the Slate campaign. And I have been able to work so well with him. I value him being in the group with us. And so we both spoke, and he spoke up very passionately about this. And so the motion was passed. And we're happy a few weeks later to hear, and I don't know if it's because of her letter or just letters from around the world, that she was released temporarily to get medical attention. So, there might have been another time that they would say just let her die in prison, but this time she was released temporarily. So I'm so happy that we all focused on the human rights and people being able to represent other people or assist other people without loss of their lives, loss of their liberty, and work towards a common goal. I really, really appreciate that.
So it sounds like, we hear so much these days about polarization, and it sounds like, there was an opportunity there for it to go down that road, and you found a different path, which was far more beneficial. Are these kinds of experiences giving you any hope at this time? Because that's what I'm looking for, is sort of, where is the hope? What are you seeing that's attainable as we get into this new year? Can you sort of project forward as to what you would like to be seeing, 12 months from now?
I do see hope, because I haven't experienced before. Like, we hear about police taking away lives of other people. It's happened for a very long time. And now I've seen enough is enough. And not just enough is enough from the world, but also people reaching out to me and saying, in a nice way, enough is enough, and I'm here if you need me, And so I've never ever experienced that in my life, where people are reaching out to me with empathy, saying that there's enough already. And so that gives me hope that If the world says enough is enough, not just one group of people, we now see this problem as a societal problem, not just a Black problem or a female problem or whatever. It's a problem with society. And I think that once we start to see things as a problem as society, that's when you can help
Mhm.
really make change.
Mhm.
So it's not just a subset of groups. So I do have hope that change will come about in the future. I do believe that there will be probably might be issues in the future, but I do hope that they will be reduced substantially.
Mhm.
I do hope that I will be able to attend court on a consistent basis and not be mistaken as anyone else but a lawyer.
Mhm.
Or if I am with a junior that happens to be a completely different demographic than me, it's not automatically assumed that I'm working for the junior lawyer.
Yeah.
Or if someone meets me in the elevator or bumps into me in the hall, um, because Walker, you can't really tell what that person looks like. Instead of saying, I didn't think that you were the person that started the firm. I thought it was a guy, or it's like, oh, okay, it's not a big deal. So
Mhm.
I hope I have hope, and I think that with the change in times, the change in politics, whatever your politics may be, um, the fact that you also have a woman in a very high role helps to manifest this change.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Tanya. I'm really grateful that you took the time to be with us. And I know your schedule is very busy, and I wish you all the best for 2020.
2021.
I wish you all the best for 2021. I'm still in your last year.
Past the 2020. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Tanya Walker is the managing partner of Walker Law in Toronto. She's also the co-chair of the Law Society's Human Rights Monitoring Group.